Hello and welcome to week 5 of Statistics 1. This past week we took a look at measures of variability, namely standard deviation, range, variance, and interquartile range. They are all statistics that give you a measurement or a value to get a sense of how spread out a set of data are. The week before that we talked about measures of central tendency, namely mean, median, and mode. And those are statistics that give you a sense about where the numbers fall. So again, with week 3, we're taking a look at if you have a large set of data, what is basically the average of that data? And with week 4, we were taking a look at how spread out is that data around the average. So week 5, we're going to take the next step and put them both together with what's called the normal distribution. But before we do that, let's take a look at what we just covered in week 4. I want to talk briefly about the Excel activity. So one of the activities for week 4 was using this link that guided us to this Excel activity, part A only. And I bring this up because I just want to point out again that this document is going to be used throughout this course, as well as the set of data on that Excel sheet that came with it that I'm referring to on here. So for example, the data on this Excel sheet is going to be used throughout the course. So let's take a look at what you may have completed for that item there for part A on that assignment, which is basically taking the data from 2.16, that one problem that we did a couple chapters ago, and then practicing using Excel to find some of this data. First thing I did was constructed the histograms by first constructing the frequency distributions and then having the graphs depict these frequency distributions through what's called a histogram. And you'll notice here that the two of them, neither one of them is really perfectly symmetrical at all. They're both leaning one way or the other. And that's reflected here on some of the data here that you see when we found the descriptive statistics. So let's take a look at what happens here when our data is maybe leaning one way or the other and how it's reflected here on the statistics printed out. So this top chart here was for the students that had mediators, and the mean was a 3.18 with a median of 3.3 and a mode of 3.56. You'll notice that these 2 points are not exactly the same. They're close, the mean and median, but they are different a bit. And that's due to the fact that this is not symmetrical. The more that this graph is symmetrical, in a nice balanced shape, the closer these two values are going to be together. Same thing goes for this graph. Because this is leaning one way with some outliers in this direction, it also then pulled the mean and median different from each other. And you'll notice here, for example, the one with the median, with the mediators, the mean is a little lower than the median, 3.18, a little bit lower than the median of 3.3. And that's because the clump of the data, the majority of the values are here, all clumped together in this area. There's a few outliers over here that are pulling the mean down. This is one of the points we talked about in chapter 3 that I just wanted to point out. And you'll see how it's reflected here. Meanwhile, over here, the clump of the data are here, and there's some outliers up in this direction, and they're pulling the mean up higher. And you'll notice here that the mean is greater than the median for the graph of the non-mediators. You also see down here that there's a bunch of other stats like standard deviation and sample variance. Standard deviation is the one data point that we took a look at in chapter 4. And I know that the one video walked you through how to do it by hand and also on Excel. But I can't stress enough the importance of getting a sense of what standard deviation is and how it's affected. Both of these have very close to the same standard deviation. And basically meaning that they're both about equally spread out to each other. Even though they're not symmetrical, the clump of the data altogether around the mean and median are roughly the same. If I took some of these values and spread them out even further, took some of these values and made them large, like up in the 4 range, some of these values and pushed them down below 2, what that will affect is the standard deviation. The more spread out the data is, the larger this number gets. The more clumped together they are, the smaller this number gets. And that's an important data point that we're going to use from here on out. You also notice down here that the interquartile range, that IQR, which is the inner 50%, and the values are given here. So I just wanted to walk you through a little bit on how you can see the relationship between the graphs and the statistics. Now let's take a look what's due for week 5. In week 5, we're going to take a look at what's called the normal distribution or the normal curve. You may have heard, and even the term normal, when you say something seems normal, that's technically a statistical term. And sometimes we talk about a bell-shaped curve. Well, bell-shaped curve is a symmetrical curve, and a normal distribution is a very specific type of bell-shaped curve. So for this week, we're going to read carefully Chapter 5. There's 3 items in the text to complete. And then there's also an assignment that you'll see here as well. What I did put in here were a couple screencasts that walk you through the whole idea of the standard normal curve in detail. If you're more comfortable reading it first, read the text and then maybe watch the video, or watch the video and read the text. But each of these walk you through the majority of what this chapter is about. I feel that this chapter 5 is so important, a pivotal one, because it's basically used throughout the rest of the course. That it's important that we get the information to you and you understand it as best as possible. Then down here, 2 of the items from the text from the assignment are worked out as well, step by step. I really want to, or 2 samples, 2 of the items, not from the homework, but samples out of the book that are very similar to what the homework is. But I highly recommend you watching this also, and it walks you through step by step how to complete these problems. I'm also thinking very strongly about having a Saturday morning Google Hangout session for anyone who's interested. Totally optional, and I will send an email out to see who is available and interested. But I think it would be wise at this point to have a little question and answer session. If anybody has any questions, maybe we could work that out together. Again, this chapter, not to spook you with it, but it's important enough that I think we have to take our time, get an understanding of what's going on here, because the procedures that are done in this chapter, and as far as the general terms and its use, are going to be used throughout the course. So good luck with this week. Again, keep an eye out for the opportunity to have a Google Hangout later in the week, and I'll talk to you soon.